Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Craig here, and you are listening to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions, a podcast designed to help you create and sustain healthy sexuality and a great life. I want to let you all know that Michelle and I celebrated our 13th, or the Mindful Habit celebrated our 13th anniversary the second week of June, a couple of weeks ago. So blessed to have you guys along for the ride. And I've got a really special guest today. Sathiya Sam runs the DeepClean program, and he's been helping people just like I have for a number of years. He has an awesome Instagram page. I love his message. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. And congrats on 13 years. You and your wife are OGs, pioneers in this space, especially online. So much respect for what you do, and it's a real privilege to be on here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, it's so great to see other people talking about their story. And I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but 13 years ago, when she first went on the Anderson Cooper show, and then went on then together we went on the Katie Couric show, like me going on that program eliminates the chance of me returning to corporate life
No
and
kidding.
assistant general counsel.
In
It's
the boats.
crazy.
I was just saying you burned the boats with that one.
Yes, we burned the boats with that one, and that was part of my design. So, where I want to start is tell me how you got here. What brought you to this place where you've got clients like me all over the world, and lots of followers and helping people. How did you get here?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty typical in that sense. I had my own struggle with pornography. I think what's a little bit different about my story is I'm just not the person that you would expect to have struggled. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. In fact, my dad is a third generation pastor, Craig. So strong lineage of, kind of religious figures in our family. I went to Christian school. In fact, it was in the computer lab of my Christian school where I first got exposed to porn. So everything was set up for me to make good decisions and not fall into this addiction, but I did. And I felt the helplessness of it. I felt how difficult it was. And I really had this thing in my heart like, man, if I can ever figure this out, I want to provide the solution that I wish I had right now. And because I was more faith-based and faith-oriented, I was looking to churches and religious figures to get guidance on this. And the information and the advice was so embarrassingly surface that I was really frustrated. It was like install an internet filter, talk to somebody you trust about it, or talk to your pastor about it,
Right.
pray about it more. Exactly. Up the spiritual disciplines. And, for me, like just in my, I guess you could call it naivety or my innocence, I did these things. I did them 110%. And I thought, perfect, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to quit pornography. And truthfully, I didn't make any progress. I think I actually, I would say I made worse progress because I thought I was making progress because instead of struggling every day, I now struggled every week, but my weekly binges were way more intense. So it's kind of like just stockpiling everything for one day a week instead of doing it, a little bit every day. And that was where I was like, okay, there's got to be more to it than this. And if I do figure it out, or I was actually a little bit more determined than that. I said, when I figure it out, I will then do everything in my power to help other guys figure it out. So we're not at the 13-year mark. I launched Deep Clean in 2018, and we've been serving guys ever since. And that's a little bit of kind of how we all started.
Nice, nice. I love that. You remind me of me because this idea, Satya, is when came to me walking out of inpatient. I was
Hmm.
in inpatient for 3 days. I was addicted to bath salts, having an affair with prostitutes, watching copious amounts of pornography. Just got fired from my second job. Michelle hadn't left yet because I was having a mental health crisis and wanted to
Hmm.
be there for me, at least for the kids. And when I walked out of inpatient, they handed me my, here's what you're gonna do after, and it was more therapy and more meetings, which is wonderful, and
Yeah.
which is all of that brought me here. But in that low point, because part of my job as an executive was training, and I think this is going to lead us to a conversation I want to have with you, was training the entire organizations of 10,000 employees, was developmental milestones, metrics, structure, tools, measuring
Yeah.
success, accountability beyond saying you're accountable. And I had this crazy idea that I could build a better mousetrap using those principles versus the weekly, once a week, 50 minutes with a therapist. And I think you and I have some of the similar experiences. Tell me, what you think are some of the challenges with traditional therapy and what experiences you had.
Yeah, I think so. The first thing I'll say is just as a caveat is my life has been really impacted positively by therapy. I've
Me
I've
too.
had crises of my own. Like my wife was bedridden when we were engaged. The wedding almost got called off, family drama, and a therapist, he's still a friend to this day, actually, really helped me through that season. So therapy's been really beneficial. But you and I, off air, we were sharing, we have all these clients that have come to us that have seen therapists for years, and then they do one session with us or they're a couple months into our system and all of a sudden like finally they're getting breakthrough. And I try not to come up with my own ideas and just spout them. I have a platform now, the podcast has grown a lot, 100,000 plus followers on Instagram. And I take that seriously. Like if I'm going to say something, I really want to make sure I've thought about it, that we could say there's evidence for this in our community. And with the clients that we have where they've done therapy before, they didn't get the results, there's a couple commonalities that I've heard in a lot of the stories, maybe not every single one of them, but a majority. Number one is we work with men exclusively. And so with men, I find that men generally need a system. And so when you have a therapist who says, "What do you want to talk about today?" Guys sometimes, I mean, guys will give you something. We have no problem coming up with something to talk about, but it's not necessarily going to be the most helpful thing in the world. And I think for us, like Deep Clean is a system, and there is an individual component, so it's still nuanced. But I think that lack of system is one reason for sure. The second thing is I would say therapists are incentivized to keep you long term, and so that's an unfortunate reality. Like that's something that I've had to learn the hard way. I would say the last few years, getting married and then becoming a father now and just having a business to manage is you just realize you have to understand why people are incentivized. My parents are getting ready to sell their home that, I kind of grew up in and all that. And I'm helping them work with the realtor. And as we're going through the contract, I'm just asking, so how does he make his money? Now, obviously, he makes his money on a commission, but they have this special offer. They're going to sell your house in a certain amount of time. And I said, well, if he's going to sell the house in a certain amount of time, that means he's not going to be as incentivized to get the best price because his contract states he's got to hit by a certain thing, a certain time frame, right? And we're just kind of understanding the contract and the
The
therapist contract,
motivations,
the
right? The
motivation.
motivations. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think an average therapist is going to say the longer you work with me, the more money I make off you. Now, a good therapist knows that even if you work with me for a finite amount of time, if I solve your problem, you'll refer me to other people, and then I'll just continue to make revenue that way. But I think a lot of therapists are incentivized maybe the wrong way. And then I would say the last thing is that most therapists don't have a track record helping people in this area. They're like, yeah, porn addiction, it's like all other addictions, or or they'll say porn addiction really is like it's a detachment issue, which that statement has some truth to it. So then they just go through the attachment issues, which covers part of the problem. But there's nuances to porn addiction that somebody needs to be a little more specialized in. So those are my theories, but I am really getting tired of it because a lot of guys that we work with have spent money, they've spent time, they're wasting like so many valuable resources on therapy and just not getting the results that they want.
Yeah, no, it's you said what you said is really important. And to be clear to everybody listening, if that's your option, you get therapy. You do
Hmm.
whatever it is you have to do to
Hmm.
get the right help. This conversation isn't to bag therapy, but is to give you the common limitations that we both see so you can make good decisions going forward and you can plug that gap and make sure you're getting value. Because the same as, uh, I totally agree what you're talking about a system. I remember sitting in therapy once thinking to myself, what am I doing setting the agenda? And I
Hmm.
harked back to my corporate career as an executive and as a leader. What do you guys want to talk about? Now, listen, that's important. That's
Yeah.
important. But your point around structure is really important. And the other theme that I see often, and I want your thoughts on this, is the problem centric nature of the relationship. So if
Mm,
the therapist is anchored to the disease-based model, which has lots of great attributes to it, they're even more focused on problem, 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 problem. And if you
yeah.
extract that dynamic and put it in a high performance environment or leadership or corporate one, like you'd really be screwing things up. You really would be
Yeah.
screwing things up. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I would say that's my experience. It's not exclusive to people that have worked with therapists, but I do think therapists can fall into the spiral where it's very problem focused. And what happens long enough, and you know this maybe better than I do, is if you struggle with something for a really long time, and then every week you hear a new problem, a new layer of the problem, you start to act, you end up becoming so crippled by the shame of your addiction, the weight and the gravity of your problem that you could hear the most inspiring message, you could have the most effective tools right before you, and you won't even use them. You won't even take advantage of the opportunities before you because the problem, the weight of it is literally blinding you from doing it. I was actually meeting with a client today. He's had multiple emotional affairs. He got caught watching pornography by his wife and his daughter at the same time. His life has really really been impacted by this. And all he's heard ever since kind of came out and started to get help is you're a problem. This is going to take you, decades to recover from. Your marriage will never be the same. He's heard so much negativity that it's like I feel like I'm a what do they call it? Like an NLP, like neurolinguistics programmer. Like I'm like trying to just retrain him to think that hey, this is actually possible. Because until he believes this is possible, he's not actually going to take the action. So that's the most devastating part, right? Is if the problem becomes this big thing is people don't take action. And you and I know if people don't take action, then they can take in all the knowledge they want. Nothing's going to actually change in their life.
Oh, and that is so true. And if you're obsessing on the problem and the physical act of PMO, porn, masturbation, orgasm, you're really only focusing on a small fraction of the deeper underlying issues because not
Yeah.
doing that thing is the function of something else. And the other important lesson that I learned is I want your thoughts on this too. I love it when clients have those big emotional catharsis moments. One of my gifts is helping people go deeper quicker. But I learned early on in my coaching practice that all those big moments, I take someone deeper than their therapist, deeper than this, deeper than that. I realized that I was doing it all wrong. I realized that I was repeating the patterns of my therapy
Mm.
because I might be good at it and we all celebrate and pat ourselves on the back. But one of the most important lessons that I learned that those big emotional catharsis moments, while powerful, we love them, we feel good when they happen. I think of them like fireworks. They're big and powerful, but they fade very
Mm.
quickly. And if you haven't operationalized that learning, that teaching, and somehow incorporated it into the fabric of your life, that big, powerful moment drives a few weeks, maybe a few months of compliance. But because
Mhm.
we're creatures of habit, we return back to that status quo. Thoughts?
Man, it's such a good point. You're reminding me, I have a friend who's a physiotherapist. He started working at this clinic, and the leader of the clinic, the founder of it, he's got a couple clients that every time they see him, you can literally hear through the walls, you can hear the client screaming, like, "Oh my God!" Because the pain is so intense, and he's a chiropractor, so he's doing adjustments. And he said like when he first started working for the clinic, he's like, what is going on in there? And so he asked the doctor about it, and the chiropractors explained what he does. And my friend said, "How long have you been seeing this patient?" And he was like, "Oh, 4 or 5 years." Like she comes in every week, right? Because it's the release. It's that thing that they kind of get hooked on. And at that point, it's like, oh, it doesn't even matter if my back's actually getting adjusted or I'm getting back into proper posture, proper alignment. At that point, it's like you're kind of chasing the emotional experience.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and guys have a really hard time admitting this, but watching pornography and struggling with anything really at an addictive level is actually a very emotional issue, right? It's not logical because if it was logical, you would put the filter on your device and then it would stop you from watching it, and then you wouldn't watch it anymore. But there's a deeply psychological component to it, and I think sometimes when you have solutions that kind of are playing into these high intense emotional experiences, or like the breakthrough moment, and we think, oh, this is the breakthrough moment, I got it, not realizing that a breakthrough without a follow through is useless, right? And I think it can play into the addictive brain, and actually keep us hooked on the recovery instead of actually becoming recovered. I'll give you another really good example, because we have a lot of clients who come to us that are more faith-based. And so they've resorted to some of the things I mentioned, like an internet filter, praying more. And I know you have faith-based clients as well, so you're very familiar with some of the syndromes that can come here. And the one thing that I observed after a couple of years of seeing guys who, and I was patient zero. I was the guy who wanted the quick fixes as well. We're recording in January, so January 1st would come around. This is the year, 2025 is going to be my year. And I'd get all this momentum and I would chase these little highs. And what I didn't realize is every single time I tried the new thing, I tried this little quick fix solution, I'm literally just reinforcing the part of my brain that's been programmed by pornography to get quick hits, to get the result immediately, and to not be patient, right? To not have that delay, to not have any kind of long-term thinking. So this is like some of the secret
I
sauce of
love it.
recovery is you're literally reprogramming yourself. Even in the nature of your solution is reprogramming your brain to think long term, to get out of the immediate rewards, and to really be able to delay that gratification. And I think if your practitioner isn't providing you that, they're really doing you a disservice. They're ultimately just reinforcing the things that are going to keep you addicted.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I was talking to a client last week, and it was the right moment at the right time, Satya, to deliver this message. And they were so focused on, I have to do this, I have to do this, in the moment, I got to do
Mm,
this. And listen, those things are important, right? Those
sure.
things are important. Obviously, to break a habit, you have to make a habit. I said, I'm going to give you the worst, life coaching advice that I could possibly give you. It is so counterintuitive. And I said, do nothing. Do nothing. When you get triggered,
Mm,
when you get triggered, when you're blowing a gasket and you've got to, execute your trigger response plan, or, whatever you call that in the moment response, when you've got to be dialing up your self care, all these things you have to do. I said, I want you to sit in it.
mm,
And I want you to observe how it feels in your body. I want you to observe the thoughts. And what's great about that advice is, and you've been helping guys long enough, right, to realize that sustainability is everything, identity
yes.
change, self-care, self-esteem, like I almost want to say full stop, but obviously there are other components to it. The
Sure.
healthy sexuality piece, but I often find that's an outcome for most guys.
Yeah.
And there's something about being able to sit in your discomfort without attaching to it. And so
Mm.
I love that advice at the right time, at the right moment, because someone's listening now is saying someone paid him to tell him to do nothing. Yes, he did, and it worked and it helped. What are your
Right.
thoughts on that?
Well,
Tell
but
me
this
about it.
but this is the whole basis of sustainable recovery. I love that word you used. It's not just that you rewire your brain, and it's not just that you change your environment, and it's not just that you form better habits. The actual, like, the thing that most people that have a recovery successfully have in common is they've built skills while they were going through the recovery process that are just as effective once they're recovered. So the example you just gave is perfect. You have somebody who is probably a little bit too activity oriented, probably a little bit in their fight or flight kind of dysregulated state a little too commonly. And if they don't learn how to slow down, if they don't learn how to sit with discomfort for a little bit longer than what they're comfortable with or what they're accustomed to, unfortunately, they could even go a year, 2 years without pornography. But if they are just constantly in fight or flight, if they're constantly jumping from one activity to the next, that person's probably just going to fall into another addiction. So you're giving that person a chance in that moment to build a skill that they're going to need on the other side of recovery. Because guess what? Once you quit pornography, it's not like all of a sudden it's daisies and roses. You're never tempted. Like you got to do your work just as much. It looks different, mind you. And I mean, you've been free for a long time. For me, it's been 9 years in February. So it's been a long time. But there's still things that I have to do to regulate myself, to keep myself in a good mental state, and to make sure that I don't, even veer off in that direction. And that's where the skill building comes in. Because if you can build a skill
Yes.
during recovery, you can still use it on the other side, and it should serve you just as well. And some skills are training wheels. They're with you during the recovery period, but eventually you let go of them and you ride your bike. But some skills actually make the spokes of those two main tires. And things like this, like learning to regulate, learning to slow down, these are some great examples of skills that you need not only while you're recovering, but on the other side of it. So I think you're bang on. And I think it's amazing, Craig, that you provide this to your clients because this is what they actually need to be sustainable in their recovery.
No, I love it. And I'm so glad to hear that you agree because it's really, really, really important. I want to declare right now for everybody listening, because people think that I'm recovered, rainbows and unicorns, no problems. There'll be the occasional rainbow and uniform, but life is hard.
Yeah.
At a recent low point, I lost someone close to me, Satya, and I might have been in a funk anyway. I got triggered to put on a disguise, a fake nose with a mustache, and cover up my tattoos, and maybe I could go to a strip club. I actually had those thoughts.
Hmm.
In the old days, that would be a reflection that I am, in fact, a worthless piece of you know what. I wasted my time, I wasted my money in recovery. Now, when I have, and I want other people to know this listening, it's not, you don't eliminate the triggers. Your mind is going to think all sorts of crazy things, especially when you're under duress and you're
Hmm.
experiencing a new moment, a new loss, a new pressure. But the difference now is instead of that a call to act out, that is a call to action. And I hear, I need something. I'm in pain right now. I'm
Yeah.
dysregulated. An
Yeah.
addict, the addict part saying, "Hey, I know how we can make this go away. I got a good idea." The glasses and the mustache, right? Ridiculous. It's a ridiculous, foolish thought, but I had them. And that was the big shift for me, was seeing that it's okay to have them. We're
Hmm.
men, we're wired for variety. This is a habit that for most of our clients and ourselves goes back to childhood. And
Yep.
ignoring that reality, you do so at your peril. And so I just wanted to say that to everybody listening.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. It's interesting, and I'm sure you've observed the shift. You actually kind of talked about it earlier in the podcast. Like the world is waking up to the harmful effects of pornography now more than ever before. And I know for me, like last year, I started getting all these invites to be on these fitness podcasts. One of which is they're literally the number one ranked fitness podcast in America. They're called Mind Pump. So they just want to learn about pornography addiction and how porn affects people. And so we had a great interview. And one thing that we got talking about there is the difference between sobriety versus freedom. They're not the same thing, right? And I
Yeah.
think even what we were talking about earlier, like a lot of whether your people go to therapy or maybe they go with inexperienced coaches, we'll put it that way. Often the emphasis is let's just get you sober. Like let's get that streak. You've got 90 days,
Ugh.
let's get it to 120. And it's all about like, did you do the behavior or did you not? When you focus on freedom, freedom is really about a change of the heart. It's about the change as a person. It's your entire nature changes. And like I said, I come from a faith-based background. That's an incredible, like the whole idea of reincarnation or becoming a new creation, to use Christian language, is incredibly embedded into the doctrine and the philosophies around recovery. What you're just talking about though, because people always say, they're like, that's a great idea, Sathiya. I love the thought. But how do I know that I'm free? And what you just said is exactly it. I say that freedom is being able to look at your mistress in the face and still say no. And
Right.
I think it takes time to develop that. Like I know for me, I was probably about 3 years clean of porn, maybe 4 years. Yeah, 4 years actually. And my wife and I had just bought a house. I was exploring the neighborhood, gorgeous park. Now, kind of not like a park like grassy knoll park, but like trees, like these huge trees kind of park with ponds and owls and birds and all kinds of stuff flying around, like a really beautiful park. There's this homeless encampment. And I was just walking by. I thought it was kind of odd. So I was looking and I mean, there's like a Walkman. You remember Walkman, Craig? You remember the
Oh, I
Discmans and all
do.
that
I
stuff?
do.
So I hadn't seen one of these in like 2 decades. I just thought it was so interesting. And as I'm kind of just scouring through the stuff, I see this stack of porn magazines. And it's whatever, it's the Playboys and penthouses and all that stuff. And I immediately see it and I walk away. I've been clean a few years and I just know like I've been programmed enough to know like, hey, don't even entertain it, just walk away. But as I'm walking away, this thought occurs to me. I'm gonna leave behind Playboy magazines. Kids ride their bikes through here. There's young families that are walking their kids around. And I actually have an opportunity to, dispose of these magazines and make sure that
Save the
somebody else doesn't have the first
day.
exposure.
Save the
Right.
day.
Right. But the question is like, but am I talking myself into doing that? But really, I'm just trying to get a little hit, or is this like genuine charity here? So I'm doing a little self-analysis, and I feel like no, I'm in a good place. I'm gonna throw these magazines out. So I collect them all. Thank God, the covers are nothing too crazy. I got my hand on the cover, my other hand underneath, and I'm carrying this stack of magazines. And I'm looking around, and the nearest garbage can, it felt like a 10-minute walk. It was probably like 2 minutes, but it was far, far away. And
And
every
they got
step, it's like,
heavier and heavier and
dude,
heavier.
you
10
get
pounds
it.
over 10 minutes is, a lot.
Legit. Right. And every single step, it's just like, oh, I could take a peek. My brain's going there. Anyways, I make it to the garbage can, I dispose of them. And I just realized, man, Sathiya, 2 years ago, Sathiya, 5 years prior to that, like I could have never done that. Something had shifted, and I was able to look at the very thing that had caused me so much pain and so much dysfunction. I was able to look it in the face and still say no. And I think that's freedom. When you pursue
That's freedom.
sobriety, yeah, when you pursue sobriety, you don't necessarily get that, right? You're always one bad decision away. Any day could be your relapse day. You kind of live with this lingering paranoia that you're going to go back to who you used to be. I think freedom acknowledges there's a change. The work still needs to be done to steward it and to facilitate it, but there's a change there, and I am actually a free man. And that to me is that's the penultimate goal of the recovery process, and that's what Deep Clean's all about.
That's awesome. I want to hear more about the role that faith has played for you. I know it's important in your life personally. And as you were talking earlier, when we started the call, you talked about how as a child you were set up for success. And, I might not think of you as someone who would fall into pornography, third
Hmm.
generation minister's kid. And in fact, that is exactly, the client profile of a
Uh-huh.
lot of my clients. When I hear minister's child or pastor's child, I got to make sure it's not a blind spot, but I immediately know I need to explore the role of shame. And there's this
Yeah.
this conflict of this shame that says you are bad, and then you've got these amazing, beautiful principles of grace and forgiveness, and they are so
Hmm.
often at odds. Tell me
Yeah.
about the role that faith has played for you.
Yeah, I mean, faith has definitely compounded my addiction when I had it, and I think it's given extra dimensionality to my recovery on the other side as well. You really explain that very well, right? There's the standard that exists in faith practices, and certainly as a Christian, there's standards that we are to uphold. And then you also have the grace of God and the forgiveness of God because He knows that you can't meet your standards. For me personally, the linking piece or the thing that connects these two concepts that I had to wrangle with and wrestle with for years and years, and honestly, if this would have been my priority early on in recovery, I think I would have hit freedom a lot faster, a lot sooner. But that's the concept of identity. And this is the third. We have a three-pillar process. That's what Deep Clean represents. And the third pillar is shifting your identity. In this context of faith, for me, my value as a person was equated with how well I did, how well I performed. So in addition to, being very involved at church and all of that, I was also a high achieving academic. I skipped a grade. I had my honors degree by the time I was 20. I had just learned that whatever you do, that's the reflection of who you are. Which means when I perform well and I'm achieving well and I'm getting research awards, and I actually had 5 figures in research grants the first couple of years I was in university. I was doing some really interesting stuff. I felt good about myself. I felt valuable. But anytime I struggled or I fell short, or certainly if I was watching pornography behind closed doors, secretly I had this sense that, like you said, I am wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong with me. And so a huge part of my recovery was actually dissociating my value as a person and my performance, whether it was academically or religiously or even relationally or otherwise. And it was learning that as a standalone on my own, I have inherent value and worth, and that even God sees that. In fact, God sees me as valuable before I could do anything for him, and regardless of my shortcomings. And I think that's a nice thing to say in theory, but when you really understand that at a heart level, when you really experience it, that's really where your life can change. And that's where my identity started to shift. So it was the detachment from behaviors and worth and value as a person. Does that make sense?
Oh my God, it makes perfect sense. And it's not like you can have the sin, but it's not like, let's just talk about it from a model perspective, that they're, you know, what was the last words of Jesus on the cross before he said, Father, why have you forsaken me? He forgave the murderer,
Mm,
like
right.
forgiveness and
Yeah.
grace. And I just love helping clients operationalize their faith
Hmm.
in not just in deed, but in identity, like you talked about. There's so many, low hanging fruit, to help change because they've been punishing themselves. They've been bad. They're bad. They're bad. They're bad. And
Yeah.
one of the things I like about you is that you probably know this too. There are programs out there, leading programs, where the guys are in a circle with one in the middle, where they're not supporting him and lifting him up. They are shaming him. They are
Hmm.
shaming him.
Hmm.
And I like that you've taken this in a more accurate, faith aligned, my opinion, my humble,
Yeah.
opinion is in an alignment with those principles. And I was wondering if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, no, I agree with it, and I just think the forgiveness piece, we could do a whole episode on this, but the
Yeah.
forgiveness piece is such a big deal because think about what we were talking about earlier. So our second pillar is healing of the heart, and this is where we explore trauma. This is where we're very fond of inner child work. I know you're fantastic with IFS and internal family systems. This is where we categorize all that kind of deeper work. And to me, the ultimate resolve in a lot of these scenarios, you have a negligent parent, maybe you have a history of some sexual abuse, or maybe it was more subtle. For me, it was a mother who was very loving but not expressive. And her lack of expression really left me feeling unloved and questioning kind of my own value. And out of that place, I started to just seek female attention, chasing girls and then pornography. Pornography was my way of feeling like I was affirmed and accepted by someone. It very subtle. You would never know. My mom wasn't negligent in an overt way, but there was a negligence or a lack there that drove a lot of my behaviors. And it's helpful to label it. That in of itself is incredibly liberating, but it's a completely different dimension when you forgive. And when you can say, like, the adage that we have in our community for forgiveness is, you owe me nothing. Like, you may have done whatever it is, you owe me nothing. Like, I'm letting go. And it doesn't mean that what you did was okay. We're not justifying it necessarily. We're just saying I'm not going to let it burden and hinder me. That is incredibly powerful. And I would say that's only one part of the equation. The other big forgiveness piece is forgiving yourself. I was working with a tech entrepreneur, very, very successful at a young age. And, he's about to cross 40. And, these decade birthdays, they have this way of kind of, they can get in your head a little bit, so he's in his head. And all he was thinking is, man, how much further ahead would I be in life? This is a guy, very successful, beautiful family, staple in the community. And all he can think about is, man, how much further would I be had it not been for my porn addiction? And that's a great symptom or it's an obvious symptom of somebody who has not forgiven themselves. And so I think we can understand forgiving others, but I think forgiving yourself as well, a very, very important part of this conversation that often gets overlooked.
Well, and it's not a one time event. One of the
Right.
things that I've learned about forgiveness through parts work, that part that can't forgive is pushing your client, pushing us to be better. We
Hmm.
want to be better. We don't want to forget. We want to learn from that lesson. So
Right.
that forgiveness, that part that can't forgive, is actually trying to help. The problem is it leaves you stuck in shame and only increases the chances that your outcomes are going to be poor. And
Yeah.
when I learned, because what would happen for me is I have done immoral, offensive, denigrating acts to myself and other people. And I used to get these shame hits, and it would be like, don't forget, like a reminder of how worthless I really was and how stained I was and how broken I was. It was, further evidence of that I'm just a bad person. And that was after the work. Like I did all this work on myself, and I'm still having memories of this event. I obviously can't let go of it. I have to dig deeper around it, right? And so now, you're focused more on that in traditional treatment. And I remember realizing that, wait a minute, I have to operationalize forgiveness. Forgiveness is
Yeah.
not a one-time event. It is a process. It's a skill.
Yeah. Right. Right. Like we were talking about earlier, right? Building these skills. Great example, actually. What a great example of a skill that will help you in recovery, that is necessary to experience recovery, but you will still use it on the other side. You're still going to have to work through relationship dynamics, work through hurt, work through pain. I love what you said, though, the emphasis there. It's not a one-time thing. And you may have moments of, deeper levels of forgiveness, but it is the ongoing process where it becomes really powerful. Like the example with my mom, I remember when I identified this, going through a forgiveness process, but it's not like that dynamic ceases to exist. I still have a relationship with my mom. I still see her on a very regular basis. She lives 5 minutes down the road from me. We have grandkids, or we have her grandkids now. So, she's obviously always excited to hang out with them and see them. And so if forgiveness is just a one-off thing, then what happens the next time that you're triggered? What happens the next time they do something that hurts? You end up kind of handcuffed, or you spiral back. And this is where misinformation can be really harmful, because you think, no, I went through the forgiveness process, this shouldn't be happening. And then people will start to self-sabotage. I'm sure you see this happen all the time. We definitely do. People make some progress, and then they just slightly misunderstand what it looks like or how long it takes. And all of a sudden they start to self-sabotage over nothing. And the best example we have in our space is people who streak count, right? So you have somebody who is counting streaks, and then let's say they're doing the work, and sometimes we need to do some course correction with our clients because they're doing the work, they're getting deeper underneath the surface, they're tackling the roots. They're 6 months, and then they have a setback, they have a slip, and
Yep.
and it's like, man, like the sky is falling. And we have to just remind them, like, whoa, hold on a sec. So you were struggling with porn on a daily basis or whatever it was. You've gone 6 months, you've done the deeper work. So if I'm hearing you right, you've had one slip in the last 6 months. And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, yeah, but my streak and da 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 da. And it's like, no, dude, you had one. Like, you get to decide how you respond to this slip right now. This can be a little bump in the road, or this can be the thing that sets you back into a tailspin and you can binge all over again. But it doesn't have to be that way. And if you're trying to uphold the streak, then yeah, this is cause for a downward spiral and a pity party. But if we can zoom out a little bit and maybe pay attention to the larger trends, keep focusing on the roots, this is just a little bump in the road and you get to continue. And that those the perspective, that right, it's the perspective that really goes a long way to keep you on the right track long enough until you get those lasting results that you're after.
Exactly. And I find that my Christian clients really struggle with the concept of harm reduction and seeing it, from that perspective. And a client said something to me recently that I thought was awesome. And it just because the awareness clicked in. He said, I just realized that I PMO'd more times than I brushed my teeth.
Wow.
Do the math. Think about some of your clients, early on when they were kids, sometimes a few times a day, definitely daily for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And you've not done this thing for any period of time and in any other area of business or weight loss, or it would be a tremendous achievement. It would be an incredible achievement, yet it's frame it the shame part awakens and really can ruin the
Mhm.
show if they don't have guys like you bringing them up a few thousand feet and saying, wait a minute, we can learn from this, and make things better and
Yeah.
strengthen, or we can anchor ourselves to this notion that we're back to square one. There's no such thing as square one.
Yeah, that's right.
Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop it. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's all about the mindset. So I want to ask you, I want to ask that back to you. When someone does say like back to square one, what do you say? How do you guide someone and give them that perspective shift?
Yeah, I asked them questions on what do they think they've accomplished since, well, I asked them to define square one. What does that mean?
Yeah,
And when you ask them those questions, you find that when you peel back the layers, not too many, it's the I my streak is gone. My streak
yeah,
is gone. So I'm back to square one. And
yeah.
so I help them identify the progress that they've made. I try to put the accomplishment of any, quote unquote sobriety in perspective. And now I've got this brushing your teeth analogy because I got the calculator out and did some math and I went, oh my God, if you're not brushing 3 times a day, you're doing this more than that.
Yeah.
And help them and try to get them excited about learning from the mistake and what systemic changes can we make going forward, because when you've been doing this as long as I have and as long as you have, you see people post sobriety experience tremendous pain and suffering, the loss of a
Mm,
loved one, a job loss, uh, uh, physical pain, cancer diagnosis.
yeah.
Love you, brother. He knows he knows who I'm talking to. A brother with a recent cancer diagnosis. That's going to punch you in the face hard, and you are going to get triggered hard, and you're going to feel. And I felt this way. It feels in that moment like you haven't done a stitch of work on yourself. Here you are, back to square one. False,
Yeah.
wrong, incorrect. That's a part. That's a part that wants you to do better and punishing you for doing bad, and has all
Yeah.
these, all this training. And it's not just in training, I mean training through professionals, and the reward in the 12-step model, which totally makes absolute sense. The reward of the sobriety, I wonder, like in a perfect world with unlimited resources, we would also reward how many times they've exercised and practiced mindfulness and shared a difficult truth with their spouses, the make a habit part of the equation. And so
Yeah.
that's what I say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point. The make a habit of it too, right? Like it's a lot of the mental patterns and the mental changes. And I think the one thing, and I'm not sure how your work is structured, but the one thing that I've been really thinking about more when our in our community, we had a really good year in 2024, just incredible client outcomes, just fewer and well, more stories of guys coming back 18 months, 24 months later being like, hey man, we had one guy who, he quit porn. He sent us it was around 18 months, I think, that he had gone. And then he said, by the way, I've run 2200 miles since I started, or since I quit porn. And we're like, oh, what's the number? Like, what are you talking about? What's the number there? And he's like, oh, I always want to train for ultra marathons, but I just never had the ambition when I was addicted. So once I quit pornography, I started training, and he's run a couple half marathons, and he's kind of gearing up. And so we were getting more stories like this, and we're kind of trying to figure out like, okay, what's the deal? Like, what's the commonality? And it's consistency over long enough periods of time. That's like, I mean, there's definitely some qualities. Like, there's some characteristics, there's some factors, there's some specifics. But like the one thing that me, you, all of your successful clients, and all of our successful clients have in common is they didn't quit. And so I
That's
think
right.
I think it's just a huge part of this. Like whether you're gonna encounter, a mental barrier, whether you get triggered by something that you weren't prepared for, whether you just make a stupid decision, like you kind of give into one of those like subtle gateways, like you have two drinks too many, right? And that's all it takes. Like it's one, two drinks too many, and then you're scrolling and you're watching stuff you shouldn't watch. Those setbacks, they might happen. And if they happen along the way, the question you need to ask yourself is just how do I keep going? How do I keep moving forward? And as long as you can answer that question enough times, eventually you're going to find yourself on the other side of freedom. It's just some people, they just don't ask that question enough, or they don't have a guide like you, or somebody to guide them along the way to keep them on the right path. So it's a big deal, just the consistency and the fortitude that you build within that process.
Well, and first off, we celebrate failure. Whenever someone shares that they slipped, I
Dude,
want the
yeah.
first words to be out of my mouth, congratulations. Now that I know it sucks, and but I and I like surprising some people with that perspective because it kills us or it makes us stronger.
Yeah.
The point you made about sustainability, the reality is, and I work with a lot of executives like you, if you looked at the scope of this thing that we're trying to prevent, and we agree that in order to prevent that, we have to live a great life, we have to take care of ourselves, feel good about ourselves, have healthy belief systems, learn tools to respond to conflict, practice mindfulness, emotionally regulate, have mentorship, are connected with other men. Like it's a list. If you want
Yeah.
to live a great life, you practice gratitude. You have to have strong in your faith. You have to do that. And that's why I call my long-term support program the next level, because the reality is, and I always like to acknowledge self-serving things when I'm talking about this stuff, is you need long-term help. And
Yeah.
that long-term mentorship, expertise, accountability, community, vulnerability, like those things that our clients outsource to us, do you agree that you need those things? Do you want to live a great life? Then you gotta, like, a mastermind, and that's how I build my long-term program. Is
Hmm.
we're focused on creating a great life, and building the tools or the systems to make that happen. You know what I'm
Yes.
you feeling me?
Oh, dude, 100%. When my son was born, it's about a year and a half ago, I took some time off and I didn't know I was just a new parent, so I didn't know how much newborns sleep the first couple weeks, right? Before you get some of the sleepless nights and all that. So the first couple weeks he was born, I actually had all this time and all this space. And so I was kind of just reflecting on the work we do and where the direction that I want to take things in over the next couple of years. And I had this little phrase kind of pop out in my head because I was looking at the client stories. One of them I just mentioned to you, but lots of guys who, and you have lots of stories like this too, right? Guys quit pornography, and then it's not just like the story ends there. They become better husbands. They become better fathers. They go and they start that business they always wanted to. They get a promotion at work. They start volunteering in the community because they don't have to worry about being found out. There's all these different things that guys do to make the world a better place. And I realized that if you change the man, you change the world. That was kind of this phrase that popped up in my head. And so, we're still developing it, but I've been really thinking about that's cool. What you call it, the next level. Is that what your next
Yeah.
your next step is? I love that, man. We've been really thinking about that too, because it's not actually about quitting pornography. It's just that pornography or whatever the affliction is that you have is the barrier that's stopping you from unleashing your potential, becoming everything God made you to be, and making this world a better place. And quitting pornography opens the path to do that. But for me, I mean, I've had to pay for goodness, like so many coaches to help me with business and my finances and my health and my fitness. There's been so many areas where I've just needed guidance to do better and to really like, harness the fullness of my potential. And when guys quit porn, that fullness becomes available. And it's cool that you have a program like that because we're working on something very similar, like of the same mindset at least of how do we help you kind of rebuild your life? Because that's actually what this is about. This is not about throwing stones at the porn industry and all that kind of stuff. There's certainly a conversation to be had there, but I'm much more interested in just seeing guys fulfill their potential, make the world a better place. That to me, that's like the ultimate reward of all of this.
I love that. My quote, so I've always tried to advertise ethically, and I know you do too.
Yeah.
But one of my YouTube videos, man, and I'm not changing the title because it's my truth. The cure for sex and porn addiction. I got it right
Right.
on the top of my chin. It says the cure for sex and porn addiction is the
Yeah.
aggressive pursuit of a great life. And
Mm.
while there's certainly a cliche, when you look at people right on the other side of this, and they're not just sober but healthy.
Yeah.
Well, they're healthy, they're happy, they feel good about themselves, they're connected, their faith is strong. Like that's the
Yes.
aggressive pursuit of a great life.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And look, I don't think that's a crazy statement to say that that's the cure. Like there's actually data that would suggest there was one study
Yep.
in particular, over 3,000 participants, and they were examining like, okay, what factors in somebody's life are the most associated with viewing pornography? And they found that the leading cause, if you had this in your life, much higher chance than anything else that you'd watch porn, meaninglessness in life, just a lack of any kind of purpose, or like you said, like an aggressive pursuit. Like there was no reason to live. There was nothing that was really driving them. Jordan Peterson once said, like, the reason people quit an addiction is because they find something better to do. And so I think that's it. Like pornography kind of gets you out of debt, but then somebody's got to teach you how to build wealth, right? How to actually build that long-term sustainable, yeah, value, that's actually going to make your life worthwhile. And I think that's a really cool part of it. One of the things we do with our clients very early on is we have them set a vision board. And it's so funny. I don't know if you were like this, Craig. I've always been pretty ambitious. So even when I was at the peak of my addiction where I felt really hopeless, I still had some dreams. I still had some ideas of what my life
Yes.
could be like one day. But we have some clients who don't. They're so far down the shame spiral or the hopelessness spiral that's like where the coaching actually begins for us. Is like, hey, let's just imagine what life could be like if you quit pornography. Sometimes that's where the work is, but it's so important to kind of just set a vision ahead, set something that you're heading towards, because again, whether it looks exactly the way you draw it up or not, that's not really the point. But the point is you have a direction, you have something you're going after, a direction to move in that's going to motivate you to do some of those more challenging aspects of recovery or survive that temptation or that trigger on a really weak day. You need those things to really keep you going. So I think, yeah, without that pursuit, I like that, the aggressive pursuit, without that kind of that really deep rooted sense of purpose, very hard to step forward and certainly to stay free once you're on the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, listen, we get a lot in common, and I hope we get to do this again.
We
I do
will.
want
You're
to
going to be
talk
on my
about,
show, man. I'm excited to
yeah,
have you on.
I'm so excited for that. How do people find you on the web? I'm going to post the links below, but let
Sure,
people know how
sure.
they can get in touch with you and find you.
Yeah, I respond to all my DMs on Instagram. So if anybody ever wants to hit me up over there, I would love to do that. We're very active. And then I have a book called The Last Relapse. And for any podcast that I'm on, I always like to give it away for free. So you can get a free download of it at thelast relapsebook.com. Or, if you are a physical book person, you can buy it online as well. And we donate all the profits that we make. That one's really just trying to get our system out and accessible to as many people as possible. So either of those places are great places to find us.
Awesome. And the domain one more time?
Thelast relapsebook.com.
thelast relapsebook.com. Thank you so much for being on Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. Can't wait to continue this conversation, and I'm really privileged to know you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Till next time, the cure is the aggressive pursuit of a great life. And if you need help, mentorship, expertise, accountability, reach out to one of us. We thrive on this. It feeds us. There's nothing, better than helping someone change their lives. And thanks for listening, everybody. Make it great. Have a great day. Bye.